Mr. President, today marks 13 years since the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. At that moment, I don't think Americans would have been surprised that we would still be dealing with that 13 years later. But in the 13 years that passed, there have been moments when we wanted to hope that this had passed from us, that somehow it was no longer a danger, but it is a danger today as it was a danger then. We clearly should not forget those who lost their lives on 9/11. We continue and should continue to be grateful to our men and women in uniform. Mr. President, I appreciate the service that you have provided to the country wearing that uniform yourself. Intelligence professionals out there doing what they're supposed to do, the first responder community working diligently to be ready to respond in ways that keep us safe. I remember well, as others do, one of the things we learned on 9/11 was that those first responders were not properly linked in a way that allowed them to communicate with each other like they generally now are able to, that the response that they had was probably adequate in Washington, and New York might not have been adequate in terms of capability in some other place. But even in Washington and New York, we found the firemen couldn't talk to the policemen, and the policemen couldn't talk to other first responders, and have done a lot to try to really close that gap in a way that further protects those who protect us. You know, as the president acknowledged in his speech to the country last night, there is no doubt that our nation and freedom-seeking people everywhere still face a real threat from terrorist groups and from enemies who wish to do us harm, who can't tolerate our ability to live together in a society where everybody doesn't have to be the same way and everybody doesn't have to believe the same thing. We're reminded on this date that just 2 years ago, 4 Americans were killed during a terrorist attack on the American consulate in Benghazi. There's a new book out, 13 Hours, that provides some additional firsthand accounts of what happened there. It's always been surprising to me that we had that information available to us from the people who were there, and whether it was at the end of the first week or the end of the first year, we'd still not heard much of that, but beginning to hear that in a way that once again clarifies that that was a planned attack in the ongoing efforts to destabilize the world and move it toward some extremist view of the way people need to conduct themselves. We've seen what's happened with ISIS, and sometimes referred to as ISIL, but whatever they're referred to, have managed to get themselves in a more powerful position than any terrorist group ever, a true terrorist army with natural resources that produce income, with looting of banks and financial institutions that produce income, and maybe the most terrifying, with the people from our country fighting alongside them who have American passports, who can return here, people from, in probably much bigger numbers from European countries, fighting alongside these extremists who have access like people have never had, in ways they've never had, because they would be the homegrown terrorists, the terrorists that would have access to us in different ways that we've always been most concerned about. These terrorists are clearly not a manageable problem. The president must show, and gave real commitment last night to the understanding that this is a group that cannot be allowed to continue to exist, that this is a group that we have to destroy their capacity, their ability to attack us, to impact our way of life, and I'm hopeful that the president's resolve and his strategy will actually be sufficient in both cases to meet what was his stated commitment to destroy this extremist group. As a member of the Defense Authorizing Committee, as a member of the Defense Appropriation Committee, the Armed Services Committee, and the Appropriating Committee in Appropriations, the Defense Appropriating Committee, I'm going to do everything I can to be sure that those who serve us, that our first responders, that those who protect America have the resources they need. On this day, we should remember, and on every day we should remember, the innocent victims, the first responders, the families who lost so much on 9/11. And we also need to remember that it is the strength of our society that is what puts the biggest target on us. It's the ability of Americans to live together, the ability of Americans to respect other points of view, the ability of Americans to share those points of view with each other, but understanding you can do that in a free society that puts that big target on the United States of America. We're not a target of these extremist groups because of what we've done to them. We're a target of these extremist groups because of what we stand for. And may we continue to stand for that. May we stand strong for that. And as we do that, we should always remember the price that can be paid by individuals and families if terrorism is able to achieve its objectives, which is to scare us away from standing up for freedom, standing up for the kind of society that we live in. And so that's one of the things that certainly 9/11 every year brings back into focus as perhaps no other date does.